Okay, so today we're talking about pay when paid, controversial contractor topic. And it's controversial because I don't think it's fully understood. Every state in the union is different. Their lien laws are different. Pay when paid versus pay if paid. It's different, okay? I'm very familiar with the New York perspective on it and the Florida perspective, and they're totally different. But I'm going to teach you today what pay when paid is and what it means, okay? My entire career, I'd say 90, 10, 90% of my career, public contracting. Pay when paid. There's no 10% to get me started, none of that stuff. Got to be capitalized to do that work. So I'm going to put a nail in the coffin for you. You are going to understand what pay when paid really means from an experienced contractor. Okay, so pay when paid asks, when does the payment become due? And pay if paid asks, does payment ever become due if the owner never pays you, Mr. GC? And that's the entire fight. Timing can delay payment, but risk transfer can erase payment. That's the difference between pay when paid versus pay if paid. Where I'm from, in New York, it's unlawful to do a pay if paid. I'm carving out when I need to be paid. I'm agreeing to a pay when paid within a certain period of time because I'm not going to assume your risk if the owner never pays you. Now, yes, I have my rights to a mechanics lien. Anybody who's ever done a mechanics lien understands it's a pain in the ass, and they don't really even fully understand it. Now, I am not going to assume that risk of the GC not getting paid from the owner, so I will do a pay when paid up until a certain amount of time. Okay, if you're asking me and not willing to do that, then what you're telling me is you have zero intention of paying me, even if the owner doesn't pay you, so I'm assuming your risk. Now, if I'm going to assume your risk, my friend, then I need to be assuming an apportioned amount of your profit. So pay when paid asks, when does this payment become due? Pay if paid is, do I get paid if the owner never pays you, man? And that's the whole entire thing. Now, I'm not giving you legal advice. Construction payment law is very state specific. The exact language matters, and you need construction counsel to review your actual agreement. I'm giving you education on this concept and how I have operated and navigated these waters for over 20 years, and how the guys who I've been around my entire life at the highest level have operated pay when paid versus pay if paid in a practical sense. $2.5 billion in public works construction. So listen, this ain't a recommendation, dude. This is a prescription. So here's the practical starting point. On bigger work, pay when paid language is normal. It's the normal course of doing business. If you're a sub, you're going to frequently be told that you're getting paid after the GC gets paid. Now, that arrangement is not abusive. It's part of how cash moves through a project. Don't be afraid of that at all. You're not being taken advantage of. That's how it works. But you've got to follow the money and then identify exactly where the owner's risk lands in the chain which you sit. The subcontractor builds the work. The subcontractor funds payroll, funds materials, funds equipment, insurance, supervision, overhead, extended general conditions, etc. Okay? Subcontractor submits its billing. The GC includes that sub's work in its requisition to the owner. You can't just let a GC, can't just take his word for it, man. Now, his schedule values is going to have a bunch of line items. Those line items are going to include your work if you're a sub, right? He's got to manage the cash flow on his job. He's got to pay you. He's got to finish this job. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference between the schedule values and the CPM, and you're never going to see the schedule values. But if I can get my hands on I could get an idea of where the schedule values is. Now, I'm going to ask for the CPM. Some guys will just give you the CPM, and some guys won't. They'll just give you like a fragment of your work because they don't want you to see the durations that they have for other guys' work, and then you could come back. If you're sharp, you're going to come back and say trade stacking, I got delays, loss of productivity, this is not, you're making me work out of sequence, this is not my sequence, this is not my durations or whatever, right? He's going to try to protect himself. And I understand that, especially on larger jobs where you've got, all of these divisions of construction going, and he's responsible for all of them. But I'm going to ask for the CPM. If I get my hands on it, then I'm going to understand the SLV. So then I understand, and I could see what work is going on in the site. I know what that billing, kind of had an understanding of what that requisition is going to be from him to make sure that I'm tucked into it. You'll work. Okay, and these guys will not put the appropriate and accurate percent complete on the CPM schedule and their SLV to get paid to cover your costs. I know all the GCs are watching this. What are you talking about? I'm talking about my life's experience of that actually happening, dude. That's what happens. It's incumbent upon me to make sure that I know what's going on and I'm on the level so I can continue to fund my operation. It's a little hack to kind of figure that out. So the owner delays. The owner disputes. Where's your massive risk as a sub? Right there, dude. Delays due to other people. Delays that are due to no act, cause, consequence of you and your company. Change orders. Unforeseen field conditions and other scope. All of that stuff. You have massive risk. Your finance at work for these freaking guys. Interest-free. You're entitled to your overhead and profit. But now you're sitting on delays. You got work. They can't submit the SOV because they're sitting there waiting. They're going back and forth. They're playing patty cake with each other because he's got to deal with the relationship with the owner and all that type of stuff. It's ridiculous. That's why you have to be clean as driven white snow. And when you get a shot to hammer these guys, you go at them with a howitzer. So the owner delays, the owner disputes, the owner reduces the pencil wreck. Some drunk inspector is out there eating a liverwurst sandwich going, that's not 20%, that's like 16. Meanwhile, on a giant line item, that's why your line items can't be so big. That's a massive risk exposure. Okay, we're talking about a 4% decrease on line items that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's a meaningful reduction in pay rate. Meanwhile, you think, and you sent the bill into the GC for XYZ, he can't get the damn thing approved. You get a check that's short. Plus, the bastard is holding 5 points, 10 points retainage on you, interest-free. Which is why it's incumbent for you to be sharp as a tack. So the owner reduces the pay apps, decides not to pay or whatever it might be. Public guy's going to pay you, but you're 90 out. So time passes. Now, ask the question. The only question that matters, who is going to eat this loss? Who's going to pay for this? So if the clause merely creates a reasonable period, what the hell does reasonable mean? You see that in all your contracts, reasonable. Dude, what's reasonable for you and what's reasonable for me ain't the same. So no reasonability. We have to get clear and detailed on things. So if the clause creates a reasonable period for the GC to collect money and then pay you, that is the timing mechanism. If the clause says that the GC never owes you unless and until the owner pays him, that is the GC attempting to transfer the owner's risk to you, which is what happens in the state of Florida. It sucks. It's terrible. It's not your risk by default, but the GC chose the owner. The GC negotiated the prime contract. GC came to you and said, hey, mate, you didn't have to go take this guy to dinner. You didn't have to do all this stuff. You didn't have to put this portfolio together. All I did was send you drawings. You give me a price, and I'm going to fucking give you work. I appreciate that, and I understand that. And everybody who's watching this should definitely understand it. They had to exert the marketing dollars. They had to do all that stuff to go get this monster. And they flip you a set of drawings and you give them a price. Although you had to reach out to them and get on their radar in the first place to be able to price their work if and even trust you and buy you out in the first place. My point is the GC owns the relationship. They own that upstream relationship. So the GC has direct claim against the owner. You, as the sub, you own the performance risk inside of your subcontract. You have to build your scope properly, and you've got to document it, okay? And you got to bill it correctly, like I was kind of giving you some game on earlier, and you have to satisfy your contractual obligations. But the owner's ability or willingness to pay the prime contractor is not automatically the subcontractor's commercial risk, and that's the point when you negotiate this. You have all the contractual obligations, Mr. GC, upstream to the owner. I don't. I only have it as it relates to my work and the pass-through terms of Article 2, mutual rights and responsibilities in the AIA contract that you ripped off the internet and gave to me. and didn't pay the AIA the fucking royalty fee. I don't assume the risk of the owner not paying. You do. That's your commercial risk. So when I work, you pay, okay? And you get to keep the reward by marking my work up. Got 16 divisions of work going. The owner's paying 16 different overhead and profits, plus the GC's OH&P. Brother, that's your risk. You're getting the benefit of marking up all of our work. You are getting the reward for that risk that you're taking for the owner paying, not me. You've got to understand this perspective, because now you start to have clarity on the difference between pay when paid, pay if paid, how to negotiate, how to look at that. Okay, so in New York, my world, where I come from, this distinction is very important, because a true pay when paid provision can operate as a timing mechanism, all right? It might postpone payment for a reasonable time while the GC pursues payment from the owner. Fine, I get it. But a true pay if paid provision makes owner payment a condition precedent. You're going to see this in your contract. That payment to you, Mr. Sub, is condition precedent of payment by owner. When you see that language, condition precedent, I want you to go bing! In plain English, what that means is that if the owner never pays me, I ain't paying you. That's what that means. And these idiots will get away with this shit. And it's in contracts to this day, 2026, after that big Wellsback case. New York courts have held that this type of risk shifting, this risk shifting clause, because that's what it is. You're going to get paid precedent upon me getting paid. Bro, that's your risk. My risk is I got to bring materials and equipment to the site, and I got to prosecute the work per the drawings and specs, the contract. That's my risk. When I do that, you pay me. Then you want me to agree that paying me is precedent to you getting paid? That is a risk-shifting clause. And in the state of New York, it's void and unenforceable. In Florida, it's a different story. Okay, but in New York, it's unenforceable. In most of the states in the union, it's like that. But your state might be different. Again, you got to know your state lien law, understand payment practices in your state. And the reason why it's unenforceable, okay, is because it conflicts with the public policy behind New York State Lien Law Section 34. The New York contractors watching this, New York State Lien Law Section 34. You guys need to get very familiar with the New York State Lien Law. Start with Section 34. Why? Because a clause that can permanently eliminate the subcontractor's right to payment can also destroy, listen to me very carefully, can also destroy the subcontractor's lien rights before he can use those rights. So you waive your rights to lien if you sign this. Okay, and that was the argument that was made and won in court, and there's a case law on it now, and now everybody knows because it goes against Section 34 to New York State Lien Law. And what it does is that destroys, if you accept that stupid condition, it destroys your lien rights before you could even use them. So the heading might say pay when paid. This is where they're going to loop you. The heading might say pay when paid, and the contractor might call it pay when paid. You're going to sit across from Steve, who's going to buy you out. You're going to redline the drawing. He's just got back from the Giants game, and he's going to play armchair lawyer with you and try to hardball you because he's trying to jam you down on price. And he's going to call this shit pay when paid, and he don't know his ass from his elbow. He doesn't know a goddamn thing about this. And then we're going to take this jerk-off project manager's word for it, who has no skin in the game, can lose all the money and not have to cough up a cent, still collect his $2,000 a week, his phone and his truck, okay? Meanwhile, you're sucking wind, going to the bank for a line of credit because you're trying to finance another job because, God forbid, you actually try to make some money and make a name in this world and own a business, but you listen to Steve Jerkoff. Because he's going to call this pay when paid. He don't know a goddamn thing because he never read a fucking thing in his life. And he's been told that by the other jerk-offs that are above him. The estimating department might describe it as pay when paid. What the hell does the estimating department know? I've been in that. I've dealt with that. Why the hell am I talking about a contract with a goddamn electrical estimator? Get this asshole to start counting receptacles on a drawing. Get the fuck off of a contract negotiation. And that's how this world works. You're in this business, you know what I'm talking about. So you need to look for language such as condition precedent. Only if, unless, and until. You're going to see that shit. Only if, unless, and until. Or no obligation unless the owner pays. Your spidey senses need to go off. You need to understand this. Now, the best thing for you is to call counsel and then have counsel tell you what that language actually does under the law governing the contract. The difference between immediate payment and permanent non-payment is the entire point. The difference between immediate payment and permanent non-payment is what we're trying to navigate. So the timing clause buys time, but it doesn't buy immunity. If the GC receives money attributable to the subcontractor's work, prompt payment law and the contract establishes the downstream payment clock. Okay? On New York public work, okay, my world, State Finance Law, Section 139F. State Finance Law, Section 139F, generally requires the contractor to pay the subcontractor's share of the received payment within 7 calendar days. You're going to see that in my contracts. You're going to get paid within 7 days. Where does that come from, guys? It comes, if you're in New York, it's going to come from State Finance Law, Section 139F. They didn't just pull 7 days out of their ass. So if the owner has not paid, a valid timing clause may allow a reasonable postponement of payment while the GC is actually pursuing the money to pay you. There is a difference. Okay? But reasonable does not mean forever, which is why you got to get that word out of your contracts. You've got to get, they're going to fight you and push back on it because they want that cushion, okay? But I don't want that. That's a risk exposure. We're going to have to negotiate and we're going to have to clarify things so it's fair for both of us. Because when you put the word reasonable in there, I don't know what that means. You don't know what that means. We have to go to a third party to figure out what reasonable means. So my destiny of payment and your destiny of not getting a job leaned then relies on the judgment of a third party. You guys want to do that? Okay? No. So if the owner never pays, okay, the GC can't automatically say to you, too bad. You financed the labor, dude. You bought the material, you performed the work, but I selected the owner, I hold the prime contract, and I'm transferring this entire loss to you. Can't do that. But that is what these contracts read if you don't know what the hell you're signing. Okay? And that is the line that I'm trying to make very clear here for you guys. Okay? Like I said, every state's going to be different, and I know for a fact Florida is staring down a different barrel. Okay, but there is a way around that, and it's going to take a strong negotiating because the state has allowed GCs to transfer their risk to subs, and it's totally and absolutely ridiculous. But that's the state of affairs in Florida. Okay, so on larger jobs, a subcontractor has to float payroll. It has to finance that wait period. Everything that we're discussing here. Okay? It's got to produce a clean, supportable billing package. It's got to understand and price the commercial exposure. And as a GC, pay when paid terms tend to attract companies that already understand this environment, that are capitalized to be able to do this, which means they're often larger and more administratively mature. Let's put it that way, okay? Without insulting people. Okay? Because there's a true finance consideration in this that's got to be baked in and taken into consideration. And the bigger guys already get it. They understand it's baked in to their bids. They understand how that rolls up into Gen Cons and how they can apportion that finance risk, etc. Okay? So this is the norm in larger construction, and this pay when paid is going to require capitalization, which then has a tendency, obviously, to attract the larger, more administratively mature contractors. So if you're a GC and you're on pay when paid, which I totally as a GC would recommend you to be on, you are going to have to use subs that aren't as cheap as the ones that you're used to using now. Because the ones that you're using now that are cheap, you got to know, you got to cut them $5,000 so he can start. He needs that money because it's not capitalized. Okay, and so that's what you pay for. He gave you a really cheap price, and that's because you got to finance him to get started. And so it's a decision that you have to make depending on the type of environment that you're in, if you're in a low-bid environment. But if you're in a larger low-bid environment, everyone understands this, and all these finance costs are kind of baked in. What's going to come in to consideration and play in this pay-when-paid world when you see it is just know that you're going to be dealing with requisitions, monthly progress payments that require documentation, that are going to have retainage on the job. You're going to need credit and cash to operate between the billing events. You're also going to be signing lien waivers, conditional and then unconditional at the end, where on the smaller guys, you are risking and gambling everything because you don't have your subs signing lien waivers precedent the payment. So these guys can still get paid and lien you. Okay, it's just crazy. Okay, well, you don't know what you don't know. So, I'm bringing this to your attention. Okay, now as a GC, what I just explained there is a legitimate business benefit. And there's nothing wrong with it. The abuse begins when the timing mechanism is treated like a permanent transfer of loss. That's the point. That is the thread I want you guys to tug on here. And this is why contractors will go broke on profitable projects if they don't fully understand pay when paid versus pay if paid and the machinations therein and the float of cash that's necessary to operate in that environment. So profit and liquidity are not the same thing. And we are trying to bridge the two. I want to make my profit and I want my money because I need to be liquid. I do not want to be pulling on lines and paying juice on lines that is not in my bid. That juice is eroding my margin. These are real considerations when you're an owner. When you're a PM, you don't fucking care. You don't know. This doesn't matter to you. Okay? Every PM in the comment section, yes, it does. Okay, sure it does. Okay, so you put your money up next time. Okay? But when it's your money, okay, and you're bankrolling this fucking project for whomever, you have to take these things into consideration when you start to see pay when paid. So here's the bottom line. Pay when paid is not the same as pay if paid. Pay when paid deals with the timing. Pay if paid is all about the transferring of risk if that owner never pays. In New York, a clause that controls timing may be enforceable for a reasonable period. A clause that makes owner payment a condition precedent and permanently shifts the owner's non-payment risk to the subcontractor is void and unenforceable against public policy. Okay? Your state might be different. You need to figure out your state's finance and lien laws. They will be similar. Like I said, the carve-out exception is Florida, and maybe there's a few others. But understand the principle and perspective around this. So understand the clauses that you're seeing. Read your payment clauses. Understand the timing mechanism versus the risk mechanisms. You have to know who's financing the work. You have to be able to preserve your rights. And you've got to be able to operate with enough capital to survive the period between the building of the work, the billing of it, and the actual collection of the money. Because I'll tell you, the contractor that doesn't understand payment language is not taking just a construction risk. That contractor is financing somebody else's project without truly knowing the price that he's paying, without truly knowing the term, or whether that loan that he's giving is ever going to be repaid. That's not contracting. That's uncontrolled banking. You made it this far. You now have a very, very strong understanding between the difference between pay when paid versus pay if paid, and how to navigate those waters and negotiate it and have the appropriate perspective when you get into these type of contracts. You guys want to learn more about this in detail? You know where to find me in the contractor circle. See you on the next one.